Hello bookworms and welcome back to my channel. My chair is being very noisy today. Slightly annoying. Today I'm going to talk about all of the books that I read in the month of June. June seemed to be a month of electronic books because half of them are not physical. We have an equal split, which is actually quite nice. I like that. So first I will talk you through all of the physical books I read, and then we will go on to the ebooks and the audiobooks in the second half of the video. But let's go. The first physical book I read in the month of June was From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I think that might be how you say her name. This book is very, very popular on BookTok. A lot of people love it. A lot of people talk about it. And I had fun reading this, but it's not a masterpiece. I haven't read a lot of vampire books or werewolf books. I didn't have a Twilight phase, and maybe that's the reason why I'm not really drawn to vampire books or werewolf books, because I didn't have that obsession as a teen that a lot of people had. No judgment. We've all had strange obsessions. That being said, I did enjoy the vampire and werewolf aspect more than I thought I would. Okay, let's get the negatives out of the way first. This book was slow. Like, I got halfway through the book and literally nothing had happened. I don't mind a slow book as long as it's for a reason. So like, a high fantasy book, you tend to have a lot of world building. This didn't really have that, so I don't really know why it was so slow. I also found some of the dialogue a bit clunky. But that being said, I really liked the characters. I found the whole maiden chosen one thing interesting. I'm a big fan of the chosen one trope, so I liked that aspect of the book. This book finished on a cliffhanger, so I now want to read the next book because it finished on a cliffhanger and I can't cope with cliffhangers. There's also some steamy scenes. I don't read that kind of genre, it's just not really my thing. So I don't really know what to say about that aspect of the book. It's there, just letting you know that it contains some steamy bits. But overall, I gave this book a 3.5 out of 5 stars because I had fun, I enjoyed the characters, but it was a bit of a bumpy ride. Do I think it's worth the hype? Not really. Was it fun? Yes. The next physical book that I read was Subject 21 by A.E. Warren. This is a dystopian sci-fi about a futuristic planet Earth that has been left in complete disarray because of the effects of climate change. The humans are trying to undo all of the mistakes that they made that caused the planet to fall apart, basically. And through genetic engineering, they are rebuilding the ecosystems, and they've also managed to create a new class system through genetic enhancements. We follow Elise, who is a sapien, which is the lowest form of human with absolutely no genetic enhancements, and it's her story of how she gets a job in the Museum of Evolution and how she is then put in charge of Subject 21, who is a Neanderthal. But the longer that Elise spends with Subject 21, or Kit as he has named himself, the more she realises that there's not a lot that separates her and Kit. This is incredible. I really, really enjoyed this book. I'm a big fan of dystopia, and I really loved the messages that were sort of woven into the plot about environmental awareness, but I also just loved the characters. I didn't really expect this book to be as emotional as it was. I really, really enjoyed this book and I absolutely stormed through it. And I cannot wait to read the next one because this is the first book in a series. Full disclosure, this was sent to me by the publishers, but all opinions are my own and they haven't asked me to say anything. But this book is out now, you can get yourself a copy, and also the second book in the series is also out. It came out on the same day. I need to get myself a copy because I want to know what happens next. And I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read is honestly one of the best books I've read all year, and it is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Oh my god, this book is exquisite. Evelyn Hugo is a world-famous Hollywood actress who came to fame in the 50s and 60s. She's now in her 80s and is going to give an interview about her life because she is selling off some of her most famous gowns. We follow Monique, who is a journalist, and she is the one who is interviewing Evelyn, and it turns out that there is a connection between Evelyn Hugo and Monique. And that is all I'm going to say because, oh my god, there's so many twists and turns in this book that I could not put it down. This also made me cry a lot. I think I continuously cried for the last 100 pages and did not stop for like 2 hours after I'd finished the book because, oh my god, it hurts. This book is also queer, which I didn't know before I read it, so that was a nice surprise. I don't think I've ever read a more beautifully written book than this book. It is so well crafted. The characters are beautifully complex. I love Evelyn as a character. She is so complex, and at times it is really difficult to sympathise with her as a character, but I just loved it. I loved it so much. I love Evelyn, and everyone needs to read this. Like, if you're gonna read any of the books that I talk about, read this one. And obviously I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. I'd give it more stars if I had more stars to give. I then read Stardust by Neil Gaiman. Before I read this, I hadn't seen the film. I have seen it now, I watched it after I'd read this, but before I picked this up, I hadn't seen the film. But I was under the impression that the film was a kids' movie, which I've subsequently found out that it is. So I thought that this book was like a middle grade book, because I mean, it's quite short, and obviously it inspired a family-friendly movie. This is not a kid's book. And I found out the hard way. Because about 15 pages in, the character has sex with a fairy. But apart from that shock, I did really enjoy this book. It's a very witty, kind of adult fairy tale fantasy. It's a very quick read, as you can see. It's quite short, although it took me ages to read it, purely because I was writing an essay at the time. But if you want like a quick, easy fantasy book, then I would definitely recommend this. I really enjoyed Neil Gaiman's style of writing. I think he's really quick-witted and quite an intelligent writer. And maybe this will make me read Good Omens, because I have had that on my bookshelf for years. I'm a massive fan of Terry Pratchett, so the fact that these two have like buddied up to write a book, I know I'm gonna love it, but I haven't read it. But I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars, purely because it's a great book, it just wasn't amazing. The last physical book I read in the month of June was Solitaire by Alice Oseman. This is a difficult one to review because I have an old copy and I know that Alice Oseman is making editorial changes to this book. I don't know if they've already been made or if they're in the process of being made, but obviously there is a newer copy, so it's possible that that copy has been updated. So for that reason, I don't really feel comfortable giving it any sort of rating, but I did have quite a few issues with this book, mainly the depiction of mental health, because it is quite obvious that the main character in this book is suffering with depression, but depression and Tori's mental health is never discussed, it's never mentioned. All of the characters just sort of act like she's just a bit weird or she's just a bit sad, which I didn't like. But I don't feel like this is Alice Oseman's opinion of mental health, because they have written some incredible mental health depictions in the Heartstopper volumes, for example, which obviously Nick and Charlie feature in this book. But as I say, I know Alice Oseman wrote this when they were 17, so they were quite young. Yeah, that's why I don't really feel comfortable giving like a rating or anything. And I will say, read at your own discretion and make sure you like check out trigger warnings if you need those kind of things, because I don't check trigger warnings because I don't usually need them. Not a lot shocks me, but I still found this kind of difficult to read. So those were all of my physical books that I read in the month of June, and now I'm going to talk about all of the electronic books that I read in the month of June. The first audiobook that I listened to was The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. I've never read this book before, although it was very popular when I was a teenager. I don't know if it still is, because I was a teen quite a few years ago now. But yeah, I don't really know how it passed me by, because as I say, when I was a teen, this was like, everyone was reading it. And obviously there's a film of it now, which I haven't seen. This book was very different to what I thought it would be, in the sense that it was much darker than I expected it to be, because obviously it's a coming of age book. I read quite a few of those style books when I was a teen, and it's quite a tough read slash listen at times, and especially listening to it as an audiobook, I felt a little bit uncomfortable. I mean, I guess if you were reading it, it would be like you were reading someone's diary. That is like 10 times worse when you're listening to it. But I really enjoyed the style of it being like you're reading a letter from a friend. It very much felt like the character was writing to you as a reader. And the ending absolutely shook me up. I did not expect it at all. I enjoyed this. I would recommend it, although again, it's one that I would probably recommend that people like check out content warnings and stuff, although just be aware that some of the content warnings might be a slight spoiler. Obviously, your mental health is more important than spoilers. But I just wanted to make you aware of that fact. And I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I then read Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid. Amira, who is a black babysitter, is accused of kidnapping the white child that she is looking after in a grocery store, and this sets off a chain of events, which is the book. And this one started off very strong. I enjoyed the characters, I enjoyed where it was going, I was quite invested, but the ending massively let it down for me, unfortunately. I found that the characters went a bit cartoonish, a bit cartoon villainous, which I didn't really like. I feel like it could have been executed better. If toxic white liberalism is a new term for you, then I would recommend reading this book because you might find it quite enlightening. This book had a lot of potential, but unfortunately it just missed the mark a little bit for me in its characters, and because it's a contemporary book, a lot of focus is on the characters, so for me it was just a bit of a letdown, unfortunately, but it is one that I think I would recommend to other people. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. I then listened to Clara and the Sun by Karu Ashiguro. Clara and the Sun is about Clara, an AF, artificial friend, who is a very intelligent AF, a very observant AF, and it's about her learning relationships, how people communicate, and also kind of like what the meaning of love is, I guess. And this was a massive letdown for me, unfortunately. I'm a big fan of dystopian books, and I'd heard really good things about this book and this author, but unfortunately it just completely missed the mark. The thing I love about dystopian novels is that they usually come with a message about how, as a society, we need to make changes. This one didn't seem to have any sort of message or moral of the story. I kind of finished the book feeling like, well, what was that for? Like, what was the point? I won't lie, I was bored for about 80% of the book. It started off really strong. I was really intrigued about the world and like how AFs had come about, what their role was in society, and I just felt like there was lots of questions that were left unanswered. I came away from the book feeling like, well, hold on a second, you didn't tell me this, you didn't tell me this, you didn't tell me this. Like, there were so many unanswered questions, it was kind of frustrating, to be honest. I can tell that the writer is a very talented writer, and I probably will at some point check out some of their other books, but for me this was a complete flatline. I just found it a bit dull, to be honest, unfortunately, because as I say, I was quite looking forward to it. I gave this book 2 out of 5 stars because I don't think I'll be recommending it, to be honest. I then listened to The Quiet at the End of the World by Lauren James. This is a YA sci-fi, which I haven't read a lot of, but I might read more after listening to this because I really enjoyed this. The Quiet at the End of the World is about the last remaining humans that are left on the Earth after a pandemic leaves the whole population infertile. Lowry and Shen are the youngest humans on planet Earth, and they live in London with their family and the small community that is left, and they spend their time basically treasure hunting and looking for the relics that have been left behind. And you also get an insight into another character that lived through the pandemic and through the population becoming infertile. So that was a kind of nice look at a bit of a before and after, I guess, of the world becoming what it was after the effects of the virus and the pandemic. Obviously, reading this during a pandemic, probably not the best idea because it's a little bit terrifying, I won't lie, but this is a YA book, so it's not too scary and it's like content. There is a twist in it that left me so shook, and I am really good at guessing twists. I always spot them, but this one, came out of nowhere, blew me away. The only thing that kind of let it down for me was the romance. It felt a little bit forced. This might just be like a personal thing, but I do feel like YAs always seem to have a romance, whether it needs it or not, and this book didn't really need it, in my opinion. The representation was great. There's disability rep, there's trans rep, there's bi rep. Shen is British Chinese and disabled, so yeah, great on that front. And I really enjoyed the audiobook, although I will say there's some things that happen like online, so through like Twitter or like Messenger, and all of the timestamps are read out, which can get a little bit annoying after a while, which obviously reading you won't get that same like repetitiveness because you just sort of skim past it. And I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. And the final ebook that I read in the month of June was Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. Piranesi is about Piranesi, although he doesn't think that's his name, who lives in the house. And as far as he is aware, it is only him and the other that live in this world that they call the house. And you basically just follow Piranesi through this beautifully described world that is a house that is full of thousands upon thousands of statues. There's also the sea. The sea is in the house, and he like tracks the tides, and sometimes some of the rooms flood. All of those things would make a lot more sense if you read the book. I feel like I'm just spouting rubbish. This book is stunning. It's completely different to what I thought it would be. I mean, I don't really know what I expected, and for the first like 100 pages I was utterly confused, but it is so worth it in the end. Magical, mysterious, a little bit heartbreaking at times, to be honest. If you like magical realism and mystery, this is the book for you. It is honestly gorgeous. I know that there is a lot of references to like philosophers and mythology throughout the book. I didn't pick up on it purely because I'm not an expert in that field, but I feel like if you do know that stuff, you probably would pick up on it. But at the same time, this book doesn't feel elitist in any way. You can still enjoy it, even if you don't know about philosophy and mythology, which I'm not an expert on. And I still really enjoyed it, so don't worry about that kind of side of things. Highly recommend this book, beautifully written. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars purely because, as I say, I was a bit confused for the first portion of the book, but it is still so worth it. So that was all the books, both physical and electronic, that I read in the month of June in the year of our Lord 2021. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you like this kind of content, then subscribe and stick around because everybody is welcome here. I'm a little less busy now than I was in the month of May and June, so hopefully that means more content coming your way soon. But if you have any suggestions for the kind of videos that you would like to see from me, then pop them in the comments and let me know. And of course, let me know if you've read any of the books that I read this month and what you thought of them, and let's get a little discussion going in the comments. I always love replying to comments. Thanks for watching, guys, and happy reading.